Welcome to Disarming Leviathan, a podcast designed to equip you to missionally engage American Christian nationalists. For more info on today's guest and our suite of resources, visit disarmingleviathan.com.
Russell, you've been around the American church for a while. You've served in organizations like Christianity Today and others where you've had a broad perspective of the American church, specifically the Evangelical Church in America. For those of us who grew up in the pews, grew up going to Evangelical Church, help us understand what's gone on over the last few decades that have brought us to this moment.
I think we're figuring out what we love. I think often about a situation years and years and years ago in which I was preaching, guest preacher in a church somewhere in Indiana. And I had been preaching on, I believe, 1 Samuel. And afterward, someone came up and said, I really wish that you would preach on Judges. And I had just been thinking about that because I was thinking about teaching through Judges at my church. And I said, I'm trying to figure out how to do that because Judges is intentionally circular. It's repeating the rhythm intentionally. And I'm trying to figure out how to do that week by week. And this person just looked blankly at me and said, because, the Democrats are filibustering all of President Bush's Judges. And I remember feeling a little bit like an idiot at the moment. I misunderstood what that person was saying. And then I started reflecting, that maybe the bigger issue here is that this person was bored when we were talking about the biblical book of Judges.
Yeah.
And saw that as kind of irrelevant as opposed to what really mattered in the moment, which were these judges whose names we wouldn't remember right now. And I think that was a little bit of a peering into kind of what has happened within the life of the church. So you have what drives our blood pressures up are those things that we believe to be immediate and tribal. And then you add to that, I think one of the subordinate things that has happened, but really important, is an overreaction to evangelism as being overly programmed and canned. I think that the time that we had, I think about it the way we do. If you look at, there was a study done on Mormons, on Latter-day Saints, and their missions that they send kids out on. One of the things that came back is that there are very few people who are actually converted to the LDS church by 18, 19-year-old kids who are going out all over the world. But what does happen is those 18, 19-year-old kids are confirmed in their faith. They're part of this mission. They understand what it is. And I think that when you had a generation of people being trained to share the gospel with their neighbors, what that did was to hold some things back by at least reminding us constantly what's most important, and to see our neighbors and people who might disagree with us as potential future brothers and sisters in Christ. And I think that had a conserving sort of effect that has been lost.
So one of the things we're seeing right now is a lot of combativeness, dehumanizing speech, tribal affiliation language. Like, if you don't get on board with my leader, candidate, pundit, you're not a Christian. Has it always been like that?
No, and I think I've kind of changed my mind a little bit on why that is the case. I was just reading this week an evolutionary biologist whose viewpoint I disagreed with on the basis of morality and all those kinds of things. But when he started talking about polarization, I I think he actually was onto something, because what he said was, you have always had, I would say since the fall, you've always had this human nature that wants to find an in group and an out group, and to suspect the out group and to hold close to the in group. But for most of human history, that's been a small group of people around you, and for most of the American Republic, that has been the case. So the point he made was that it's not really that social media is giving us back a bubble of what we already think. It is that we know what other people think in a way that we didn't know before. So there was I mean, I can just think of people in my home church and people in churches that I've served. I have no idea what their politics were.
Right, right.
None.
Hmm.
No idea what they
Hmm.
thought about the Equal Rights Amendment or anything
Right,
like
right.
that. Now I would. And so you start out when you've got a culture that kind of sees things as, you've got to make sure that you're proving yourself to be part of your tribe. Um, that means that's then always going on and
Yeah,
always
yeah.
happening. So it's kind of like, to go back to the evangelism example. It's kind of like what we would say. Your entire life needs to be a life of evangelism, not just when you're sharing the gospel. Well, we've kind of done that, but not with evangelism. With politics, it's your entire life. And so then it becomes an exhausting treadmill, and there's no way to get off of
Yeah, I've noticed that in the congregation I serve. Uh, that I mean, I've been in this congregation for 25 years, and I remember when I started discovering things about people through the internet, as
it.
opposed
Yeah,
to at the church potluck.
right,
And
right.
there is, even in my own heart, when I'm with someone and they're talking to me about their political preferences or whatever, they're usually nuancing it, and I see their face, and they're
Yeah,
playing with their kids. uh, and that's just a different way of learning about somebody than I find like 3 sentences on social tersely stated about something
right,
I currently believe,
right.
derisive. And of course, my temptation is to formulate a story about them as to why they got that, and then
Mm-hmm.
argue with them in my mind without them there.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems like that is on full speed right now in our congregations. Uh, So we are learning about each other without each other in the room
Mm-hmm.
inside the church. We're elevating our political convictions or our policy convictions to a level, almost, if I'm understanding you right, almost to an identity level that I
Yeah,
am part of this party.
yeah. Because we have secularized, and I mean, that's been the primary obstacle that we have right now. Is we have this false narrative that the outside world is secularizing while we are not. And that means that's where the kind of culture war conflict comes in. When that's not what's happening, it's that you have both the world and the church secularizing, but in different ways. So it doesn't matter if you secularize toward. I mean, I was just talking yesterday to an atheist friend, who was saying, I really wish I could be religious because I know it is better for you. And I said, I just don't think religion is necessarily better for you.
Yeah.
I said, religion, just the Christian religion at least, wasn't really all that great in the criteria that you're building
Right.
for first century martyrs in the Roman Empire. I say
Yeah.
it's about something completely different and other than that. And when you have a religion that becomes a, a way to get you to a certain cultural identity, it is now something different. than the way of Jesus, and that has happened a lot within the church. And there are a lot of factors that have happened with that, and some of those things are the shadow side of strengths that we have. So, I mean, in every organization and movement, religious group has strengths that can become terrifying.
Yeah.
And in our case, in terms of evangelical Christianity, one of the great strengths that we have is that there's not a hierarchy. There is a certain egalitarian entrepreneurship that enabled us to be able to go out onto the plains and the frontier and share the gospel. Nobody needed to check in, do paperwork with a bishop. You just set up a brush arbor and you did it, and God used that. And that's a great thing. The shadow side of that, though, is that you can end up easily with a market driven
Yeah. Mm.
constituency.
Hmm.
And I mean, just think about that in terms of even Christian media. Um, there are very few contemporary Christian music radio stations now because they have become political talk show stations.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, why is that? It's because that's where the market is. That's where the people are. So when you're responsive to a market, that ends up changing the message and the reality over time.
Yeah. I've heard it often referred to as the evangelical industrial complex,
Mm-hmm.
that there's money to be made by saying the things that people want, as long as it's in some safe spiritual
Right.
lane.
Right.
But give the people what they want, Burger King, your way, right away. It
Uh-huh.
does
Yeah.
seem like there's an incentive structure to that. I mean, I know for me, like, preaching out of the preaching about money is
Mm-hmm.
not something I want to do, because I know that
Right.
I don't like it. Like, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And the fear that I feel is, are people going to go somewhere else? And
Mm-hmm.
this organization that I am responsible for, is it going to collapse because I can't get enough donors? I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm just, a local pastor. I could imagine at a larger level of booksellers, publishers, organizations who, need that steady stream of income. So how do you see that conflating with this current political moment, where there's a lot of money and energy given to political leaders who, quote unquote, say the God stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, is, is the I don't know what to say, the individualistic, consumeristic impulse of the evangelical church in America lending itself to this, as long as the political leader says enough God words, they can do whatever they want? Or is there some other phenomenon going on there?
I actually think it's a little bit the other way around. So it's not so much that the political leaders are using the right kinds of God language and religious language in order to then mobilize these religious constituencies. It's that the religious constituencies are mobilized by these political figures, and the political figures then will occasionally reinforce that with some God language, and that's changing even the way that it is done. So, I mean, if you just think about over the last 10 years, there are certain things that politicians would have been afraid to do if they had evangelical Christians as their constituency.
Yeah.
So you would have, people will always talk about hypocrisy and so forth. And as the old cliche goes, true because it's a cliche, hypocrisy is the tribute that vice pays to virtue. Because you have people who are saying, I can't actually express this part of me if I want to mobilize evangelical voters. Now I think people have seen, okay, that's not the case. They actually like um, some of the very same things, that the decadent things that
Yeah.
that people would like, without What I can do is to mobilize that, get the limbic system really going, and then come in and say, and don't feel guilty about this because you're actually also giving service to God.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it becomes a loop that way.
Hmm. Yeah. You draw a cross on it and it justifies its use.
Yeah. And that's always been the case. I mean, if you look at, I'm teaching through the book of Revelation right now. And what's striking to me is that the theme of the entire book, what Jesus is saying through John, through the whole thing, over and over and over again, is uh, it is not what they can do to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they think their power is. It's what you think their power is. That is not it. Babylon's going to come crashing down in an instant, in one single hour. It's your becoming like them. It's them co-opting you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the tendency is to be afraid when you're first century Rome. They don't like us, and they've got swords. And Jesus is saying, "Don't worry about that. Worry about if they do like you,
Yeah.
and
Oh, that's
and
good.
you and they co-opt you. I mean, that's what the
Yeah.
real danger is.
Oh man, that's good. Yeah. And then they coerce you into carrying their sword for them.
Yeah, and
Oh,
and
yeah.
thinking and thinking as Jesus said um, when he was warning about the future, they will think that they are doing service to God,
Yeah.
and that they includes all of us
Yeah.
because we've always got to be asking, what are the things that I'm justifying by saying to myself, well, I'm actually uh, doing service to God. I mean, people do that. I mean, you've got. I'll deal all the time with rage filled parents who think, well, I'm disciplining,
Right.
or the person who's starting to have an emotional affair, and well, I'm loving.
Right.
We do that's part of the deceptiveness of sin. And the way that we get around that is by constantly interrogating it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the Psalter says, Lord, search me and know me. See if
Yeah.
there's any errant way in me. The
Yeah.
idea, the hubris that I can seduce myself into thinking I know my own heart,
Yeah.
I think is
Yeah. And part of
creates
that
this.
is, and this plays into what has happened in the sort of the cultural polarization. Part of that is we get into Darwinian categories
Mm.
where we think there's a certain kind of person who's sinful.
Mm.
And there's a certain way that kind of person is sinful. And so we've got that category there.
Mm.
And so you start looking at that, and that is the only way to do it, and the only way. But when in reality, I mean, what the scripture is teaching is that the one who says he has no sin deceives himself and calls God a liar.
Yeah.
Uh, all of and we're able to sin in multiple, completely different directions.
Yes.
And so often what happens is it's really simple. And even if you don't know that you're cognitively doing this, you can do it spiritually and emotionally, is to say, okay, that I know is bad. I'm doing the opposite of that. Therefore, I'm avoiding sin.
Yeah.
Or those people are the bad ones. I'm not with those people. I'm with these people. Therefore, and
Yeah.
that's
Justify.
just
Yeah.
not a Christian view of how it works.
Right. Yeah. And so often the scriptures become, and you talk about this in your book, Losing Our Religion, it becomes something to throw at other people.
Mhm.
It's quotable. It's something that I quote at other people, and not something I read for my own transformation, the transformation of my community.
Or even, I think it's even a step beyond that. I think it becomes something that we quote, maybe not in a weaponized way toward other people. We quote these things, but we don't inhabit them. and we don't. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed that has happened in terms of Bible reading. One of the things I'm really thankful for with my home church is our utter failure at children's ministry, because the folks that were there didn't know what else to do, so they taught us the Bible. And we learned the Bible, and we ate some cookies,
Right.
drank some Kool-Aid, but that was it. That was what we did. And I think that there's a mentality that emerges that says the Bible is the raw material for what I need. And then you've got different kinds of people who have different categories of what they need.
Hmm.
So you've got your more therapeutic kind of mindset. This is the Bible is there for me to mine out of it. How do I deal with anxiety? How do I deal with fear? Those
Yeah.
sorts of things.
Yeah.
Then you've got the kind of mindset that says the Bible's there and it's for me to mine out of it doctrinal systems.
Yep.
So I know where to go in the Bible if I want to argue about women in ministry, or to say what I think about predestination. And then you've got a mindset that says, well, the Bible is there for me to mine out of it a worldview,
Mhm.
which usually means here's a list of the political positions that my tribe holds, and here's
Right.
why the Bible not only affirms those but maximizes them as being of most importance. All of those different ways. When in reality, if you if you can teach and train yourself an older way of attending to the Bible, which is to say, this is the voice of God, that the Spirit is speaking. Listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Spirit is speaking to me, and it is working even if I'm bewildered by it.
Yeah. Yes.
And as a matter of fact, usually even more so.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to apply something, and you're kind of in that sense of what? I mean, that's where Jesus is wanting to get people
Yes.
with the parables, is a sense of, wait a minute, what? That's an essential part of it. And so you don't go and find Job in order to answer your questions about why you're suffering.
Right.
Although, that's good to do, but it's more important that Job is already there.
Mhm.
That you're reading Job when you're not suffering, and when you are, that has so become part of you. Eugene Peterson would use that language from Ezekiel and Jeremiah: eat this book. You
Yes.
don't think to yourself, well, the pasta I had at 11 a.m. is the energy by which I'm moving my hand right now.
Right.
It's just part of you. And I think that's one of the things we have to recover.
Yeah. Paul writes to Timothy and says that the scriptures are designed to make us wise
Yeah.
unto salvation through faith in Christ. And a lot of times we think we kind of skip the wisdom part, and the being made
Right.
wise, in my understanding, is kind of like going to the gym. If you
Yeah.
develop the rhythm and practice over time, you will be strong enough to do the thing.
Yeah.
But it's not a one and done. It's a rhythm, it's practice, doing it with others. It's so good.
And it's also
So,
not abstractions. I mean, if you think about with Solomon, when Solomon asks for wisdom, one of the first challenges there is dealing with two women in a
yeah, yeah.
dispute over a baby. He knows human nature.
Mhm.
He knows maternal nature. He knows them. He knows who's standing in front of him to be able to read those things. And that's what you see with Jesus. Is he has the wisdom of the Spirit to be able to know that Nathanael needs to hear, here is an Israelite in whom there is no guile. And the woman at the well needs to hear, go get your husband and come here.
Yeah.
And in all of those cases, so it's not just like a formula, it's a
Right.
way.
Yes. A
Yeah.
way of being in the world, a way of walking, a way of living. That's good. Russell, we are in a season where it does seem like there are people who are claiming the name of Christ who are walking at least a distorted way.
Mhm.
So in your book, which by the way, I'll show a little boom. So Losing Our Religion, an altar call for evangelical America. for those of us who didn't grow up Baptist, real quick, what's an altar call?
An altar call is an invitation to respond.
Okay. Is it like a come to Jesus moment? Is
Yeah.
that a way to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you wrote this book not out of spite for the church, not to try to throw shade, but out of hope that there would be a response to the way of Jesus. And some of the things you talk about in the book that I know many of us are witnessing, this toxic tribalism, insider outsider language, especially within the church, many congregations selecting or self-selecting, many Christians self-selecting out of their congregation to go to a congregation that more aligns with their political tribal identity.
Yeah.
That seems to be happening a lot. You've got culture war posture. We're going to fight. We're going to take over. We're going to dominate. Of course, hypocrisy, which we've seen, I think, always in the church to some degree. What's your hope that the American church should look to as you're thinking about, okay, I wrote this book, I'm dedicating my life to serving the church. It does seem like there's a sickness, and many of these things are the symptoms of it. What's your hope? What do you hope we turn to, and how might that play out?
Take hope, blow it up, and give it to put it to the side. Because what most people mean when they say, "Where's the hope for the church?" is where is the reassurance as to how this is going to work out. That's what we usually mean by hope. But the Apostle Paul says, "Hope that is seen is not hope." And Romans 5, the hope comes through a process. And the process is we suffer, and the suffering builds endurance, and the endurance builds character, and the character builds hope, and the hope does not put to shame. We often want to, or at least I want to, circumvent those other things, get right to the hope. And I fear that what we usually end up with is Hananiah in the book of Jeremiah rather than Jeremiah. Jeremiah was hopeless because he was saying, this is going to be around for a while. And it's not just an external problem. This is God is doing something, and it's going to be a long time. Hananiah is saying, "Oh, it's going to be within 2 years. We're out of here," and you're speaking hopelessly. Well, I mean, Jeremiah actually was the one with the hope. I mean, that's the new covenant vision, but it was realistic. And so I think sometimes what we want is to see the signs around us in a way that Jesus said, an adulterous generation looks for a sign. You've got your sign. It's the sign of Jonah. It's the only sign you need. And so I think one of the things that we kind of want to do is to bypass the uncomfortable time of saying, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we want that, but Jesus intentionally over and over again puts people in that situation. So you see Peter walking toward Jesus on the water. Jesus doesn't say, okay, Peter, make sure you keep your eyes right on me, and we're going to get, he lets him fall until he cries out, Lord, have mercy on me. That's an essential part of it. And I think often that we want to avoid that. So what I usually say to people, because people will say, how do we fix this? And my answer to that is, you can't fix this in the sense, I mean, you have no power as an individual Christian. You have no power as an individual congregation to change Christianity, whatever that is. You have no power to change American culture, those sorts of things. What you can do is to change or to put yourself in a position to be changed personally. And that's how change actually happens. It happens in these small little, almost invisible way Jesus talks about with seeds and yeast. That's how it happens, and then moves outward. But it's not an easy process, and it's not a paint by numbers process.
So it's easy to be overwhelmed with all the broken stuff that we're
Yeah.
seeing out there.
Mm-hmm.
Just as we conclude our time together, what encouragement would you give to us as we are thinking about how to faithfully live the way of Jesus today inside of American Christianity?
Well, I think one of those things is to look at the fact that Jesus told us ahead of time all this. So, I mean, I think there's a sense in which if we were in a different kind of religion, we might look back and say, okay, our guru was just totally wrong, because look at how things have turned out. Jesus says, hey, I'm telling you all of this beforehand so that you're not freaked out when it happens. And he gives you all of these different examples, and then you live through it, through the history of the church. So look back and see the way that I had to say to someone not long ago who was saying, I really think that I'm going to have to lose my faith because I'm looking around and I'm seeing that the church doesn't work. It's there. And I said, oh, what a shame to be completely trapped in 2025. Because, I mean, imagine if you were a follower of Jesus Christ in 1503 and all that you see around you are indulgence sellers and corrupt church structure, and you say, well, the church doesn't work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, you're not able to see the bigger picture of what God is doing. If you're a follower, a God-fearer in Jeroboam's time, you might say, this is all just golden calves. Yeah, right now, God's doing some stuff you can't see. He's going to knock all that down. So I think there's a sense of having that broader picture of what God is doing, not just outside of the space we're in right now, but outside of the time we're in right now. And to know that when we're dealing with God, it's not just that it's not just that God was with us, and therefore we have reason to think he will be with us, although that's true. It's that God is sovereign over and creator of space and time. God already is with us back there, and God already is with us in the future that we can't see right now. And so that ought to free us from having an expectation of having control and a willingness to say, all that is needed from me right now is to cry out, Abba, Father. And that means recognizing the wreckage. It means seeing the wreckage. It means knowing the wreckage. It means groaning along with that. But that's what the call is right now. It's not to have a blueprint of hope. It's to have hope in a person and have absolutely no idea how he's going to pull it off.
That's such a good word. Thank you. Russell, where can people find you and your work?
We're at ChristianityToday.com, and we have a lot going on in multiple different platforms of media right now.
Cool. And just to recommend once again your book, Losing Our Religion, an altar call for Evangelical America. Russ, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.